Rome, 1st century BCC. The known world surrenders before the banner of the eagle. From the cold snows of Britain to the burning deserts of Syria, the footsteps of Roman soldiers resound like thunder over the conquered land. But behind the imperial glory and the victories eternalized in marble, another story is hidden. That of the men who bled for the Republic and then for the Empire. They are not emperors or senators. They are farmers turned into war machines, artisans, thrown into the chaos of the battlefield. They wear worn sandals and iron breastplates, but also scars of the soul. They live under an iron code, far from home, for years. On this journey, we will explore their lives, their fears, their honor, and their brutal routine. This is not the history of Rome from the books. It is the story from the camp, from the trench, from the body of a legionnaire. His name is Marcus Vibius Varro, and its history is not found carved on columns or celebrated in the poems of the bards. He is the son of peasants from Lazio, raised among wheat fields and the constant echo of military campaigns. Like many, he was enlisted not for glory but out of necessity. His family's land was in debt, and the army offered something that few could despise: bread, pay, and the promise of land. Marcus is not a born hero. He is 22 years old, with broad shoulders, and the look of someone who has seen more death than corresponds to his age. His enlistment led him to training camp in Capua, a city known as much for its gladiator schools as for its disciplinary harshness. There he met others like him: Titus, a former thief redeemed by the shield; Gaius, son of a freedman who dreams of rising in the army hierarchy; and Lucia, a young slave who works as an assistant in the valetudinarium, the camp hospital, closely observing the wounds that Rome demands in exchange for obedience. Marcus, like all of them, was molded by the harsh hand of Roman discipline, waking up before dawn, running with full equipment, learning to march for miles without fainting, holding the sword with deadly precision. It wasn't enough to be strong. You had to be obedient. You had to be part of a war machine where the individual disappeared and only the legionnaire. During his first weeks, Marcus suffered the punishment of the clubhouse, the most feared threat: being beaten to death by one's own companions for cowardice or disobedience. Although he was not the one who suffered it, he saw how another recruit fell into disgrace for stealing bread. The blows did not stop until his body was motionless. Nobody cried, nobody dared. They learned that in the Roman army, fear did not come only from the enemy. Lucia, from the shadow of the hospital, also has her war. Born a slave in Hispania, she was sold to a military doctor and learned her trade amid screams of pain. Know the sound of a mortal wound. He knows when a leg can be saved and when the saw must act. Their hands, though young, have already held grown men as they beg for their lives. Although she wears no armor, she also bleeds in every battle in a different way. Throughout the marches, Marcus learns what it means to be a piece on Rome's board. Each camp is set up and taken down like a deadly choreography, digging ditches, erecting palisades, patrolling at night with his breath frozen in the air. And always vigilant: barbarians, desert, rebellions, diseases. The enemy does not have a single face. Titus, his tent companion, used to talk in his sleep. He murmured names that no one recognized. On a particularly cold night, he confessed that he had killed his own brother in a revolt in Sicily before joining the legion. Rome does not ask about the past, just for utility. Gaius, on the other hand, wrote everything down. He had a wax tablet, where he wrote what they experienced. "Someday someone must remember that we were here," he said. Marcus admired him for that, for continuing to believe that it was worth leaving a testimony. Because deep down everyone knew that the majority would not return, and if they returned, it would be others. Changed. Broken. This is how the days and nights passed, between maneuvers, training, patrols, and punishments. And although letters home were allowed, many did not write. Some didn't know how. Others did not want to remember what they had left behind. One morning, a herald brought news from Rome. The emperor had declared a new campaign in the north. The legions had to prepare to cross the Alps. There was talk of hostile tribes, unknown terrain, unbearable cold. Some celebrated, others were silent. Marcus, his armor half fastened, simply gritted his teeth. He knew that the real war was about to begin. The sun has not yet risen when Marcus opens his eyes. The cold of the early morning penetrates the bones through the wool layer. In the camp, the day begins before light. The horn, the military horn, resounds in the gloom. It's the signal. Everyone stand up. Each legionnaire has less than 10 minutes to get up, dress, and be in line with his galea, our segmented lorica well adjusted, its shield on the back and his sword to the side. Discipline is so rigid that even a poorly placed buckle can mean punishment. Rome does not tolerate imperfection in its human war machines. Breakfast is quick, almost ritual: stale bread, a small portion of cheese, water or diluted wine. All accompanied by silence and vigilance. Eating is not a moment of pleasure, it is a moment of survival. Titus usually chews slowly, as if stretching out time before returning to fatigue. Gaius, on the other hand, eats standing up, mentally, reviewing the day's orders. Next comes the first task: inspection of the castle, the camp. Every tent, every defensive ditch, every stockade must be in perfect condition. The camp is his second body, an extension of military discipline. If the camp falls, everyone falls. Then the training begins. Marches of up to 30 kilometers, carrying between 30 and 40 kilos of equipment. It doesn't matter if they've been down that route before. Repetition is the soul of the legionnaire. Marcus's legs no longer hurt like they did at first. Now it is a dull, constant pain, like another shadow. After the marches comes simulated combat. In pairs with wooden swords heavier than real ones, they duel under the midday sun. The goal is not to win, it is resisting. Endure the fatigue, the pressure, the fear. Learn to kill without thinking. Between training, they are assigned tasks as needed. Digging trenches, reinforcing defenses, building watchtowers, preparing catapults. There is no more versatile job than that of the Roman soldier. They are bricklayers, blacksmiths, shoemakers, carpenters, and executioners if necessary. Lucia, meanwhile, in the camp hospital, attends the doctor in healings and amputations. The smell of dried blood and medicinal vinegar fills the air. He has learned to recognize what kind of wound is coming just by the way a legionnaire walks or breathes. Although she is a slave, many owe her their lives. And that secretly gives him a kind of power he dares not name. In the hours of rest, when there is luck, the men play dice, carve wooden figures, repair their equipment or write letters. Gaius reads passages from Cicero aloud, with almost theatrical eloquence. Titus sometimes just watches the sky, counting how many days are left until winter. At night, guard shifts are divided. Marcus usually prefers the last hour before dawn. It is when the cold is most cruel, but also when the silence is deepest. He clings to hair, the Roman spear, and listens to the rustling of the forest. Sometimes he sings under his breath a melody that his mother taught him. Nobody hears it, or so he thinks. The letters, when they arrive, are an emotional anchor. Some soldiers cry when they read the name of a wife, of a son they no longer recognize. Others burn them without opening them. Distance is an open wound. Roma trains them to ignore her, but not all of them succeed. The reward system is clear. After 20 or 25 years of service, if they survive, they receive a plot of land, a retirement promise. But everyone knows it's not safe. Many die earlier. Others are mutilated, some simply disappear, and yet they continue. Because the army is not just a job. It's a destination. Some days there are religious celebrations. Sacrifices are made to Mars, god of war, or to Jupiter, to bless the campaign. In these ceremonies, even skeptics kneel, not out of faith, but out of fear of bad luck. In war, any protection is welcome, divine or not. This is how the weeks go by, with a routine that alternates between sweat, mud, pain, and obedience. Every day is a battle against fatigue, against oneself. Marcus knows it. And yet when the horn rings every morning, he stands up, because he has stopped being a peasant. It's not just Marcus anymore. He is a legionnaire, and Rome does not belong to those who sleep. The winter was short, or at least that's how it seemed. The campaign in the north began at the dawn of spring. The orders were clear: march beyond the Rhine, and quell the uprising of a confederation of Germanic tribes. It was not the first time that Rome tried to impose its law there, but each attempt was met with blood, ambushes, and betrayal. Marcus, Gaius, Titus, and the rest of their cohort marched for days along treacherous paths, crossing thick forests, frozen rivers, and empty villages that smelled of fresh smoke. The legions entered a territory where Roman logic stopped working. The formations, so perfect in the open field, became clumsy among trees and mud. The banners seemed to tremble under the thick fog of the Teutonic forest. One night, while camping in a clearing, a scout returned panting. He had found signs: broken branches, footprints, blood. The enemies were close. The general, a veteran named Pulcher, ordered the defenses to be redoubled. Stakes, ditches, constant surveillance. Nobody slept that night. The attack did not come at night as they expected, but in the mist of dawn. The Germans descended like shadows among the trees, shouting in a language that seemed to emerge from the earth itself. There were no trumpets or glowing formations, just mud, axes, spears, and ancient fury. Marcus felt the first impact as if the world was splitting. The shield took the blow, but his arm trembled. Shout. Not out of fear, but out of anger. For not dying without an answer. He raised his sword and plunged it into the chest of a fur-covered warrior. The heat of the blood splashed on his face. It was the first, not the last one. Beside him, Gaius lost his helmet, but continued fighting. Titus was wounded in the thigh, but remained standing. The chaos was absolute. The orders did not arrive. Each man was fighting for his life. The formation fell, and they fought hand to hand, in spirals of mud, screams, and steel. Lucia, miles away, was not in the battle, but he was already preparing. The field hospital. He knew that death would come in groups. He cleaned blades, boiled water, prepared linen bandages. There was a calm on his face, a sacred concentration. I didn't have the luxury of fear. After hours of combat, the Romans managed to contain the ambush. It was not a clear victory, but a forced survival. The Germans retreated into the thicket, leaving dozens of bodies, their own and enemies, scattered in the mud. The ground became a grave. Marcus fell to his knees when it was all over. He had blood in his mouth. He didn't know if it was his own or someone else's. Titus lay a few steps away, passed out, but alive. Gaius was searching among the bodies, perhaps for a friend. The battle was over, but within them, something had changed, forever. The wounded were transported as best they could. Many would die along the way, others would be abandoned. There was no ability to save everyone. Roman efficiency was cruel, but necessary. Only the supplies were attended to. Lucia received the first convoy at dusk. The air carried the stench of rotting flesh. He saw Marcus semi-conscious, his arm wrapped in a makeshift bandage. They took Titus down between two companions. Gaius came, walking, looking lost. Nobody spoke. Pulcher, the general, wrote a report. He sent it to Rome, full of euphemisms, dispersed barbarian resistance, controlled casualties, and high morale. Words that did not reflect the truth, because the truth was mud, screams, viscera, and terror. But the empire fed on glory. And this battle, like so many others, would be narrated as a victory. On the streets of Rome, perhaps, a poet would sing of the bravery of legionnaires in wild lands. But I wouldn't sing about the men who didn't come back, not even about those who did return, but without a soul. That night, as the surgeons worked tirelessly and the survivors dozed in nightmarish spasms, Marcus opened his eyes for a moment. He looked at the cloth ceiling and murmured, barely audible, "It wasn't like the stories, because that is the truth that Rome did not write." The camp after the battle smelled of iron, dry sweat, and death. There were no songs of victory, no celebration, no speeches from the general. Only a dense silence, broken by moans, by the shuffling footsteps of the living and the constant buzzing of flies over the dead. Marcus woke up 2 days later. The fever had subsided and his wound was beginning to close. Lucia was the first figure he recognized when he opened his eyes. He didn't say anything. He only offered her water and brushed a strand of sweaty hair from her forehead. In that gesture, for a second, Marcus felt that he was not just another cog. He felt humanity. Titus survived, but the wound on his thigh became infected. Lucia, with firm hands, helped the doctor to amputate his leg. Titus screamed until he fainted. Nobody cried, not even him. When he woke up, he only asked for one thing: wine, lots of wine. Then he laughed, a broken, bitter laugh that hung in the air of the hospital like a shadow. Gaius, although without serious physical injuries, changed. He stopped writing on his tablet. He stared at nothing for hours. One night, Marcus asked him why he had stopped recording what they experienced. Gaius replied in a dry voice, "Because no one wants to know what it's really like." Meanwhile, in Rome, news of the victory reached the Senate and the people. General Pulcher's words were read in a triumphant tone in the forum. "Honor to our brave legionaries who have extended the hand of civilization in barbaric lands." There were cheers, sacrifices, even a banquet paid for by an opportunistic senator seeking to curry favor with the people. The citizens applauded without knowing, without imagining Titus without a leg, without smelling the cauterized meat, without listening to Marcus's nightmares. For them, the war was far away, turned into a spectacle, a legend. In the camp, life had to go on. The casualties were replaced by new recruits, boys with still clean eyes. Some barely knew how to hold a sword. Marcus, now with battle experience, was promoted to option, a non-commissioned officer in charge of maintaining order in the line. He was no longer just a pawn. It was part of the mechanism that shaped others. But that promotion did not bring pride. It brought weight. He brought the task of hardening the new ones, of turning teenagers into murderers. Every order he gave hurt more than the wound, but he gave them, because in the Legion there is no room for doubt. Lucia also changed. He no longer trembled at the sight of an amputation. He no longer looked away when he heard a scream. He had hardened, yes, but he had also learned to look beyond it. Let's see the man behind the uniform. He began to secretly write down details of the wounded soldiers, their names, their stories, their last words. I didn't know why. Maybe because he feared that if he didn't, they would all turn into faceless ghosts. The Legion remained on the border for weeks, patrolling, building fortifications, awaiting new orders. Some said they would return to Rome, others who would be sent even further away. Nobody knew for sure. In the Roman army, destinies changed as quickly as the wind. One night, by the fire, Marcus and Gaius talked about the life they left behind. Marcus remembered the smell of wheat in summer, his sisters singing while she knitted. Gaius mentioned his father, a freedman who taught him to read by copying inscriptions on tombstones. For a moment, the war disappeared, but only for a moment. That next day, they found the body of a young recruit who had hanged himself in his tent. He had not left a letter. Nobody knew him well. Some saw him crying the night before. Nobody intervened. It was common. Death, when it does not come with a sword, comes in silence. In the military structure, the discharge was recorded as desertion due to cowardice, a technicality that allowed the truth to be ignored. That allowed you to move forward. That allowed the system to continue working, because that was the other side of Rome's power, its ability to absorb tragedy and continue moving forward. Every fallen man was replaced, every defeat made up, each personal story swallowed by the collective story. Marcus understood, but he didn't accept it. He began to write secretly. He used fragments of papyrus, pieces of leather. He wrote down names, sensations, thoughts, not for the Senate, not for historians, but for himself. So as not to forget that, before being a soldier, he was a man, and meanwhile, the empire continued to beat. Unaffiliated, relentless, immortal. Spring left without warning. The days became cold again and the rains returned like an omen. The camp was slowly beginning to fall apart. Mud seeped into the tents, the wood rotted, and the men broke inside. A messenger arrived from Rome. He carried a scroll sealed with the emblem of the golden eagle. The content was brief but clear. The Legion was to march east, to a remote region where an allied city was rumored to have betrayed its allegiance to the empire and joined a group of dissidents. A minor threat, they said, But General Pulcher's eyes said otherwise. It was not an expedition, it was a purge. Marcus received the order with a mixture of exhaustion and fear. I had heard rumors. The city that had to be punished, Sarmes, was not a traditional enemy. It was a mixed settlement of Romans, settlers, and pacified locals. Many had Roman citizenship. Others had sworn allegiance years ago. But something had gone wrong. The march was fast, hard. They crossed rocky valleys and fog-ridden mountains. In the distance, the towers of Sarmes rose silently, without banners, without signs of war. Upon their arrival, local leaders came out to greet them unarmed, showing open palms. There was no resistance, just fear. But the orders were clear: exemplary punishment. Gaius, reading the decree, turned pale. He looked at Marcus. "We are going to kill Roman citizens." Marcus didn't respond. He knew that a wrong word was betrayal. The army did not forgive compassion. The assault began at dawn. The doors were broken down. There was no battle, execution only, house by house, men, women, elderly. Whoever did not speak Latin was suspicious. Who spoke Latin too? Lucia, assigned as a medical assistant, was forced to wait outside the walls. When the troops returned, they brought no prisoners. Just silence. Marcus's face was covered in ash and dried blood. There was no pride, just a dark shadow behind the eyes. That night, Titus, now with a wooden leg, got drunk until he fell. Gaius, trembling, locked himself in his tent and began to write furiously. Not for glory, not for defense. This has been a massacre. The next day, rumors began that the provincial governor had exaggerated the threat to obtain more resources, that the city had not rebelled, that everything had been a political strategy. Pulcher denied everything. He ordered silence. Whoever spoke would be charged with sedition. Marcus broke down that night. He walked alone along the edge of the camp, Gaius's tablet in his hand. He knew that if they found her, Gaius would die. He knew that the Empire could forgive a crime, but not a truth. He thought about it for hours. At dawn, he decided to bury her, not because of cowardice, but to protect them both. But the act left a mark on him, a weight on the soul. Lucia, seeing him return, asked him in a low voice, "What did you see in there?" Marcus didn't respond immediately. Then he said, "To Rome without the mask." And he walked away. Weeks later, a new order arrived: return to the Rhine. The campaign had been an exemplary success. The Senate would bestow honors on General Pulcher. No mention of Sarmes, no official record. It was as if it had never existed. Titus, with a bitter grimace, said, "They will call us heroes for something that should make us ashamed." Gaius replied, "We are not heroes, only witnesses." From that moment on, Marcus changed. He didn't question orders, but his eyes did. He walked with the air of someone who had lost more than blood. I had lost the story. That heroic story that Rome told its citizens and its soldiers to keep them faithful. The night before he left, Lucia approached him with a small bag. Inside, pieces of leather with engraved names, the wounded, the dead, the forgotten ones. It was his attempt at memory, his silent rebellion. "We can't stop the Empire," she said, "but we can remember what he did." Marcus took the bag. He didn't say anything. But that night, when everyone was asleep, he buried her under a tree along with his gladius. He was no longer the same man who first wielded it. The next day, he left with the rest. One more step on the wheel of empire, but with something that they could not take away: his awakened conscience. At dusk, the column of soldiers disappeared into the shadows of the forest. Behind were invisible scars, unnamed graves, stories that no one would write. Only the wind, moving the leaves, seemed to remember them. Marcus did not return home that year, not the next one. But every step he took him away not only from the front but from the illusion. He was no longer fighting for glory. He fought so that his people would not forget. Lucia continued collecting names. Gaius, despite his fear, wrote again. Titus taught young recruits how to survive and how not to get completely lost. Rome continued to expand, winning wars, writing history. But among its official pages, there were gaps. spaces where the human, the raw, the real should be. This is one of those stories, and although Rome has fallen centuries ago, the question remains alive. Who writes the history of those who obey? But do not forget,